The December wind cut through my thin coat like it had a personal vendetta. I pressed my back against the stone wall outside the Belvedere Club, trying to steal 30 seconds of warmth before my shift ended. Inside, people who made more in a night than I did in 6 months nursed drinks that cost what I paid for groceries. I'd been invisible to them for 3 hours, carrying champagne flutes and canapes, watching conversations happen around me like I was furniture with legs. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Creditors had been circling since Nana's last hospital stay, but something made me swipe. Pronto. The Italian came automatically, muscle memory from childhood. Lucia igravla Nana. My aunt's voice cracked, and my stomach dropped into my shoes. I forgot where I was, forgot the cold. Cosa igrav successo is she. She collapsed again. They're saying we need to decide about the specialist, the Swiss one, but the cost. I switched to rapid Italian, years of Brooklyn falling away into pure Calabrese dialect. Numbers. Impossible numbers. My aunt crying. Me doing math that didn't work no matter how I arranged it. When I hung up, my hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. That was beautiful. I spun. A man stood 3 feet away, smoke from his cigarette curling in the lamplight. I hadn't heard him approach, which should have been my first warning. He wore a coat that probably cost more than my car, if I still had a car, and looked at me like I was a puzzle he'd just figured out. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, the break area is. I gestured vaguely. You work here. Not a question. His English had the kind of accent that came from international schools, not struggle. I was just finishing my shift. He studied me with eyes that were too calm, too assessing. How many languages? I'm sorry. English, Italian, you switched dialects mid-conversation. Calabrese if I'm not mistaken. What else? Warning bells rang in my head, but I was too tired and too scared about Nana to be smart. Some Spanish, enough French to get by. He took a drag of his cigarette, still watching me. And you're carrying drinks at the Belvedere. It pays barely. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm about to go into a meeting, very important people, very delicate negotiations. He paused. Would you like to make what you'd earn in 6 months, tonight? Every instinct screamed trap. But I thought about Nana in a hospital bed, about the Swiss specialist my aunt couldn't name because we couldn't afford to hope. Doing what? Listening. He dropped the cigarette, crushed it under an Italian leather shoe. My associate's wife will be there. She only speaks Italian and she's the one who actually makes the decisions. I need to know what she's really saying. You have translators. I have people who translate words. I need someone who understands what's not being said. He pulled out a business card, placed it in my palm. The name meant nothing to me, but the weight of the cardstock told me everything. The meeting starts in 20 minutes. Private room, 3rd floor. I'll have security add you to the list. I don't even know your name. He was already walking toward the entrance, where a man in a black suit held the door. Tonight, you don't need to. I looked at the card, looked at my phone, at the impossible numbers still glowing on the screen, looked at the street where I'd catch 2 buses home to my studio apartment with the broken heater. Then I walked through the door. The man in the black suit was holding open. The 3rd floor of the Belvedere was a different world. Thick carpet that swallowed sound. Lighting that made everyone look wealthy and important. A woman in designer everything checked my name against a list, her eyebrows rising slightly, probably at the discount store blouse under my coat, but she waved me through. The private room was all dark wood and leather, a table that could seat 12. 5 people were already there, 3 men in suits that cost more than my education, 1 woman in diamonds that caught the light like captured stars, and him, the man from outside. He sat at the head of the table, and somehow the room oriented around him without anyone saying a word. Gentleman, signora. He gestured to an empty chair against the wall slightly behind him. We can begin. I sat, tried to look professional in my waitress clothes and second-hand coat. The woman, the wife, I assumed, whispered something to the man beside her, her husband. He had the kind of face that smiled while calculating exactly how to hurt you. The meeting started in English. Contracts, shipping routes, numbers that made my head spin. I took mental notes, but mostly I watched the wife. She stayed quiet for 15 minutes, nodding occasionally, while the men discussed percentages and territories like they were dividing up a pizza. Then her husband said something about adjusting the timeline, and her expression changed. Just a flicker, but I'd grown up watching Nana play card games with her sisters. I knew what a tell looked like. She leaned toward her husband, whispered in Italian. If they push the timeline, Marco's shipment arrives first. He'll undercut us on price and we lose the contract. Her husband's smile didn't change. In English, the timeline is acceptable. The man who'd hired me, I still didn't know his name, glanced at me, just once. I gave the smallest shake of my head. He leaned back in his chair. Actually, I think we need to revisit the schedule. The husband's smile tightened. We just agreed. I don't think we did. His voice stayed casual, but something in the room shifted. In fact, I think we're done for tonight. My associate clearly needs time to consult with his advisors. He looked directly at the wife when he said it. She had the grace to blush. 10 minutes later, everyone was filing out. The husband looked furious. The wife looked impressed, and I sat in my chair against the wall, wondering what I'd just witnessed. When the room cleared, the man who'd hired me stood, buttoning his jacket. Your phone number. I gave it. He typed something and my phone buzzed, a notification that made my breath catch. The amount was exactly what he'd promised. The Swiss specialist, he said, not looking up from his own phone. Dr. Hartman, he's expecting your call tomorrow morning. His assistant speaks English. The room tilted. How did you? You said 6 months. That's a specific number. That's the kind of number someone calculates when they're desperate. He finally looked at me. I pay attention. I can't accept. You already did. The money's transferred. He walked toward the door, paused. There's a car waiting downstairs. Give the driver your address. If you're smart, you'll let him take you home instead of catching 2 buses in December. Why are you doing this? He considered the question like it was a chess move. Because people who speak the truth are rare, and because you helped me avoid a very expensive mistake. He pulled out another card, different from the first. This one had just a phone number. If you want more work, call. If you don't, forget you met me. Then he was gone, and I was alone in a room that still smelled like expensive cologne and danger. Outside, a black car idled at the curb. The driver opened the door without being asked. I got in because I was exhausted and scared, and my grandmother needed a Swiss specialist whose assistant spoke English. Because sometimes you step through the door that opens, even when you don't know where it leads. The driver didn't speak during the 20-minute ride to my neighborhood, where the streetlights were broken and the bodega stayed open all night behind bulletproof glass. He didn't react when we pulled up to my building with its cracked steps and graffiti. Just got out, opened my door, waited until I was safely inside the vestibule before driving away. Upstairs, my apartment was exactly as cold as I'd left it. But my phone held a number that might save my grandmother's life, and a card with another number that felt like a question I hadn't decided how to answer. I called my aunt first. Then I called Dr. Hartman's service, left a message in my careful English. Then I sat on my second-hand couch and looked at the card with just the phone number. The smart thing would be to throw it away. Go back to carrying drinks, to invisibility, to safety. But I kept thinking about how he'd known what the wife really meant. How he'd paid attention when no one else would have noticed I existed. How the money had appeared in my account like magic, except it wasn't magic. It was power, carefully applied. I put the card in my wallet, next to Nana's last hospital bracelet. Just in case. The next morning, Dr. Hartman's assistant called back. Her English was crisp, efficient, and she had already reviewed Nana's file, which should have been impossible, except apparently nothing was impossible when you had the right kind of attention. An appointment in Zurich, 2 weeks out. Costs that made my eyes water, even with the money I'd been paid. The account has been established, the assistant said. All arrangements have been made. I'm sorry, what account? For your grandmother's care, travel, treatment, recovery. You'll receive the details by courier this afternoon. There's been a mistake. I only paid for the consultation. I don't make mistakes, Miss Ferrara. A pause. Someone values your grandmother's health. I suggest you accept it graciously. She hung up before I could argue. The courier arrived at 3, a man in a uniform that was cleaner than anything I owned. He handed me a leather folder, real leather, the kind that aged instead of cracking, and left without waiting for a signature. Inside, airline tickets, hotel reservations, hospital paperwork, and a letter on cardstock so heavy it felt like a weapon. Consider it an investment. You'll work it off. No signature, just a phone number I already had memorized. I should have been grateful. I was grateful. But underneath the relief was something that tasted like a trap closing around my ankle, gentle, expensive, and very, very secure. My aunt called that evening, crying with joy. Nana wanted to talk to me, her voice thin but stubborn as ever. Lucia, who is this man? Just someone I did a favor for. Favors this big have strings. I know, Nana. And you're going to pull them anyway. I looked at the card again, at the phone number that felt like a door I was already walking through. What else can I do? She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried that old country weight that meant the truth, whether you wanted it or not. You can make sure when you dance with the devil, you're the one leading. I laughed despite myself. That's not how it works. Then you teach him a new dance, Bambina. You don't forget who you are just because someone offers you pretty things. After we hung up, I stared at the phone for 30 minutes. Then I dialed the number. He answered on the second ring. No greeting, just decision. I want to understand the terms. You work for me as needed. Translation, interpretation, presence at meetings where your particular skills are valuable. You're paid per assignment. You're protected. Protected from what? From people who would use your vulnerabilities as leverage. His voice was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing the weather. Your grandmother's care continues regardless of whether you work. That debt is already settled. That's not how debts work. It is when I say it is. Silence stretched between us, expensive and weighted. When do I start? I finally asked. There's a car downstairs. Bring a passport if you have one. If you don't, there's one being expedited. We have a flight in 3 hours. To where? Geneva, 3 days, translation work at a conference. Separate hotel room, security detail, suitable wardrobe will be provided. He paused. And Lucia, this is legitimate work. Boring even. I'm not asking you to do anything illegal. Why do I feel like that's a very specific reassurance? Because you're smart enough to ask questions. Something in his voice shifted, almost warm. That's why I want you. I should have said no. Should have hung up, thrown away the card, taken Nana's miracle and disappeared into grateful anonymity. Instead, I grabbed my passport, expired by 4 months but still proof of identity, and went downstairs. The car was the same as before. The driver nodded once, pulled into traffic that parted for us like we mattered. We drove to an airport hangar I didn't know existed, where a small jet waited with its stairs already down. He was there at the base of the stairs, in a different suit that probably cost the same as the last one. He looked at my single duffel bag, my expired passport, my discount store coat. We'll fix the passport in Geneva, the coat in Milan if we have time. He gestured up the stairs. There's food on board. You look like you haven't eaten today. I had coffee. Coffee isn't food. He followed me up, and for the first time I noticed he moved like someone used to being watched, every gesture controlled and deliberate. Inside, the jet was leather and dark wood, the kind of space that whispered wealth instead of shouting it. A woman in a crisp uniform smiled, gestured to a seat. "Miss Ferrara, welcome aboard. May I bring you something to drink?" I sat, buckled in, tried not to look overwhelmed. "Water's fine." The man, I still didn't know his name and asking now felt wrong, took the seat across from me. 3 hours to Geneva. There's a bedroom in back if you need sleep. Questions. What do I call you? He smiled, and for the first time it reached his eyes. Dante, you can call me Dante. Like the poet. My mother had pretensions. He loosened his tie slightly as the jet began to taxi. The conference is trade delegates, mostly legitimate. 2 of them aren't. I need you to identify which 2 based on sidebar conversations. That's it. That's enough. He pulled out a tablet, handed it to me. Background files, photos, known associates, business fronts. Read them during the flight. I took the tablet. The first file opened to a man's face, 50-something, with the kind of smile politicians use. Underneath, a biography that looked normal: export business, consulting firm, charity work. Then a second page, marked confidential in red. I shouldn't be reading this, I said. Probably not. Dante was already looking at his own tablet, but you can't do the job blind. The attendant brought food, real food, salmon and vegetables and bread that was still warm, and I ate while reading about money laundering and front companies and investigations that went nowhere. By the time we leveled off at cruising altitude, I understood 2 things. The men I'd be watching were dangerous. And Dante was more dangerous than all of them combined. Why me? I asked, setting the tablet down. You could hire a professional, someone trained. Professionals are known quantities. People prepare for them. He looked up from his own screen. You're invisible. No one expects the translator to matter. So I'm camouflage. You're an asset they don't know to protect against. He closed his tablet. Plus, you needed the money. That makes you motivated in ways loyalty never does. The honesty was almost insulting. I could walk away. You could, the car would still take you home. Your grandmother's care would continue, but you won't. You seem very sure. You got in the car twice, you're already here. He stood, moved toward the back of the plane. Get some sleep. We land at 8 local time. The conference starts at 9. I stayed in my seat, looking out at the darkness below. Somewhere down there was my neighborhood, my cold apartment, my life of invisibility and careful budgets. Up here was leather and warm bread, and a man who arranged miracles like other people ordered coffee. Nana's voice in my head, make sure you're the one leading. But I was already following, and we both knew it. I didn't sleep. Instead, I read every file twice, memorizing faces and names and the complicated web of who owed what to whom. By the time we began our descent, I could have drawn the organizational chart from memory. Geneva sparkled below us, all old money and discretion. The car that met us was subtly armored. I'd learned to spot the reinforced panels and bulletproof glass, and drove us to a hotel that looked like a palace. Your room is next to mine, Dante said as we walked through a lobby where the chandeliers probably cost more than my building. If you need anything, call the concierge. If there's danger, knock on the connecting door. You expect danger at a trade conference. I expect variables. He handed me a key card. There's a wardrobe in your room, appropriate attire for the conference. Everything should fit. My assistant is very thorough. In my room suite, actually, with a view of the lake that made me forget to breathe. The wardrobe held clothes I would never have chosen for myself, but that fit perfectly. Tailored slacks, silk blouses, a wool coat in charcoal gray that felt like a hug, shoes that were broken in just enough not to blister, and jewelry, a single strand of pearls in a velvet box with a note, "Wear these, they'll mark you as under protection." I put them on, looked at myself in the mirror. The waitress had disappeared. In her place was someone who might belong in rooms where decisions got made. Someone who might be worth protecting. Or owning. The conference was held in a converted mansion, all gilt and marble and the kind of art that museums envied. Dante introduced me as his translator, and people nodded without really seeing me. Perfect. For 2 hours, I followed him through rooms full of careful conversation, listening to French and German and Italian while pretending I only understood when asked directly, taking mental notes of who stood too close, who avoided eye contact, who smiled wrong. Then I heard it, a woman in Ferragamo heels, speaking rapid Italian to her companion. The containers from Marseille were delayed. If they inspect them before Marco's, people can reroute. Her companion cut her off with a look, switching to English. But I'd heard enough. At lunch, catered by people who made what I used to make, carrying trays I used to carry, I leaned close to Dante. "The woman in red, third table from the left, she's worried about containers from Marseille." He didn't change expression, just cut his salmon and nodded. "The man with her hasn't spoken anything but English, but he understood her before she switched languages." "Good." He dabbed his mouth with a napkin that probably cost more than my shirt used to. "After lunch, there's a gallery viewing, private collection. You'll accompany me." It wasn't a question. The gallery was smaller, more intimate. 20 people pretending to admire Renaissance portraits while having the real conversations in the spaces between paintings. Dante stayed close to me, his hand occasionally touching the small of my back, a gesture that looked protective but felt like a leash. The woman in red approached us near a Caravaggio. "Your translator is lovely," she said in English, smiling at Dante like I wasn't there. "She's competent," Dante replied, "which is worth more than lovely." The woman's smile sharpened. "Perhaps we could borrow her tomorrow. Our regular translator took ill." "Unfortunately, her schedule is full." His hand pressed slightly firmer against my back, "but I appreciate the interest." After she left, I whispered, "She wanted to know what I heard." "Obviously. So now they know I'm not just decoration. Now they know you're valuable." He guided me toward the exit, his voice low. "Which means they'll either try to buy you or eliminate you as a variable. Either way, we learn which side they're on." My stomach dropped. "You use me as bait." "I used you as a catalyst." We stepped out into the cold Geneva afternoon. "There's a difference." "Not from where I'm standing." He stopped, turned to face me fully. The hand that had been on my back moved to my shoulder, still controlling but somehow gentler. "You're under my protection. That's not a figure of speech. No one touches you without consequences they can't afford." "Because I'm useful." "Because you're mine." He said it like a fact, like gravity. "The car's waiting. We're returning to the hotel until dinner." I should have argued, should have demanded he define exactly what mine meant. But the woman in red was watching from the gallery window, and Dante's hand was still on my shoulder, and I was starting to understand that protection and possession were sometimes the same thing, wrapped in pearls and careful words. We got in the car, and Geneva slid past like a postcard of someone else's life. In the back seat, Dante made phone calls in languages I pretended not to understand, while I watched the streets and wondered when exactly I'd stopped being the person calling for help and become the person someone needed to protect. The answer felt like the moment I'd answered my phone in Italian outside the Belvedere Club. Some doors, once you walk through them, don't open backward. Dinner was formal, at a restaurant where they didn't give you prices on the menu because if you needed to ask, you didn't belong. Dante wore a different suit. Did he travel with a dozen? and I wore a black dress from the wardrobe that made me look like I spoke 3 languages and had opinions about wine. We sat with 2 men I recognized from the files. Legitimate businessmen on paper, money launderers in practice. Their wives were there, speaking French and smiling the way you smile when you're very good at pretending. Lucia studied at the university. One wife asked in careful English. Privately, Dante answered before I could. Her Italian is regional, very specialized. It was a lie that sounded like bragging. I let it stand. Through the meal, I translated small talk and watched the real conversation happen in glances and pauses. The men were nervous. Something had shifted after the gallery, and they were recalibrating. During dessert, something chocolate and architectural, one of the men leaned toward Dante. This partnership you're proposing, we'd need certain assurances. You'll have them. Dante's voice was silk over steel. My word is sufficient. With respect in our business, words need backing. Then consider Lucia my backing. Dante looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. She knows everything I know. If something happens to me, the information doesn't disappear. I kept my face neutral while my heart hammered. He just made me a target and a shield in the same breath. The men exchanged glances. That's quite a responsibility for a translator. She's more than that. Dante reached over, adjusted the pearls at my throat, a gesture that looked intimate but felt like a claim. Aren't you, Cara? The endearment hung in the air, weighted with implications I was meant to accept or reject in front of witnesses. I met his eyes. I understand my role. His smile was approving, possessive, and something else I didn't have a name for. Good. After dinner, we walked back to the hotel. The streets of Geneva were clean and cold and empty in that way expensive cities get after dark. Dante's hand found the small of my back again, and I didn't pull away. You made me a liability, I said quietly. I made you indispensable. He guided me around a corner. There's a difference. You keep saying that. Because you keep confusing tactics with intention. We reached the hotel, walked through a lobby that was quieter now, more shadowed. They won't touch you because killing you means I release everything. Protecting you is their only option. Mutually assured destruction. Mutually assured survival. The elevator doors closed, leaving us alone in polished brass and mirrors. It's not perfect, but it's effective. And if I want out? He pressed the button for our floor. Then you walk away. I've told you that from the beginning. Except now I know too much. You knew too much after the first meeting. The elevator rose smoothly, expensively. That changed nothing about your freedom to leave. The doors opened. He walked toward his suite, stopped at his door. Get some sleep. We fly home tomorrow afternoon. Dante. He turned, and for a moment the control slipped. He looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. Yes. I wanted to ask what I was to him. Asset, employee, possession, something else. But the words wouldn't form correctly, so instead I said, thank you, for my grandmother. Thank yourself, you earned it. He unlocked his door, paused. The pearls suit you, keep them. Then he was inside, and I was alone in a hallway that cost more per night than my apartment cost per month, wearing jewelry that marked me as someone's and not sure whose. I went to my room, took off the pearls, looked at them in the lamplight. They were perfect, uniform, expensive. The kind of thing you gave someone you wanted to keep. The kind of chain that looked beautiful while it held you. I put them back in their box, but I didn't throw them away. In the morning, there was a knock on my door. Not Dante, a different man, one I'd seen hovering near us at the conference. He wore a suit that said security and carried himself like someone who knew what he was worth. Miss Ferrara, I'm Marcus, Mr. Dante's head of security. He handed me a phone, new, expensive, already programmed. Your personal device isn't secure. Use this for all communication from now on. I didn't agree to. The agreement was implicit when you accepted the work. His voice wasn't unkind, just factual. There are people who would use your connections as access points. This protects you and everyone you contact. I took the phone. Is that what I am now, a security risk? You're an asset worth protecting. He stepped back into the hallway. Mr. Dante is in a meeting until noon. A car will take you anywhere you'd like to go in the city. Lunch is at 1 in the hotel restaurant. He left before I could argue. I spent the morning walking Geneva's perfect streets, followed at a discreet distance by a man who was probably armed and definitely bored. I bought nothing, talked to no one, just tried to remember what my life had been like 4 days ago when I was invisible and cold and in control of my own choices. It felt like years ago, like someone else's life entirely. At lunch, Dante was already at the table, reading something on his tablet. He looked up when I approached, gestured to the seat across from him. "How was your morning?" "Supervised." "Protected." He set down the tablet. "Marcus is very good at his job." "Which is?" "Making sure people I value stay valuable." He poured water from a bottle that probably cost more than water should. The conference concluded successfully. The men from dinner are satisfied with our arrangements. "You mean they're satisfied I'm a useful hostage to your good behavior?" "I mean they're satisfied that our interests are aligned." He studied me over the rim of his glass. "You're angry." "I'm realizing the terms of employment weren't as clear as advertised." "They were exactly as clear. You chose not to ask the right questions." He set down his glass. "Ask them now." I leaned forward. "What am I to you, really?" "An asset, a translator, someone I trust more than I should after 4 days." He didn't blink. "Someone I'm protecting because it serves my interests and because—" He stopped. "Because—" "Because you answered your phone in Italian and everything became complicated." He signaled for the waiter. "We fly at 3, pack light. We're stopping in Milan before New York." "I didn't agree to Milan." "Consider it a bonus. There's someone I want you to meet." The waiter arrived, and the conversation ended there, replaced by small talk and expensive food I barely tasted. But I kept thinking about that hesitation, that almost admission of something that wasn't about business or assets or mutual assured survival. Something that sounded dangerously close to real. We flew to Milan in the afternoon, the jet cutting through clean European skies while Dante worked and I pretended to read. Marcus sat near the cockpit, always watching, always between us and whatever door might open. "The person in Milan," I finally asked, "who are they?" "My mother." Dante said it like it was nothing, but his hand stilled on the keyboard. "She's expecting us for dinner." "You're taking me to meet your mother." "She's in hospice. She has questions about her estate. You'll translate. She only trusts Italian for important matters." "I'm not qualified to." "You're qualified to be present and accurate. That's all she needs." He closed the laptop. "And she asked to meet you specifically." "How does she even know I exist?" "I told her I found someone interesting." He looked out the window at clouds that looked solid enough to walk on. "She wanted to meet you before—" He didn't finish. "Before she died." The words hung unspoken between us. "I'm sorry," I said. "Don't be. She's had a long life and made her peace." But his jaw was tight and his hands were still. "She's the only person whose opinion I actually care about." We landed at Malpensa just after sunset. The car that met us drove through Milan's elegant streets to a villa that looked like it had been transplanted from a period drama. Manicured gardens, stone paths, windows glowing gold against the darkening sky. Inside, a nurse met us, spoke quiet Italian to Dante. He answered in the same language, and I caught enough to understand. Stable, comfortable, waiting. His mother's room was on the ground floor, overlooking the garden. She sat in a chair by the window, wrapped in blankets despite the warmth, looking small and fierce. When she saw Dante, her face transformed. Figlio mio. Her voice was thin but strong. He crossed to her, kissed both cheeks, held her hands. They spoke in rapid Italian, and I stayed near the door, unsure of my place. Then she looked past him at me. Questa è grave lei. Yes, Mama, this is Lucia. She switched to English, her accent thick but clear. Come here, child, let me see you. I approached, feeling like I was taking an exam I hadn't studied for. She studied me with eyes that were faded but sharp, taking in everything. My clothes, my posture, the pearls I'd worn because Dante had given them to me. You're younger than I expected. I'm 26. And he's 34, not such a large gap. She smiled, and I saw where Dante got his ability to make statements sound like inevitabilities. Sit, tell me about your grandmother. We talked for an hour, switching between English and Italian as her energy allowed. She asked about Nana's illness, about the specialist, about our family. Asked where we were from, what we'd left behind, what we hoped to return to. And slowly, I realized she wasn't just making conversation. She was interviewing me, determining if I was worth whatever investment her son had made. You understand what my son does, she finally said in Italian. Some of it. And you're not afraid. I thought about that, about the conferences and the files and the way people rearranged themselves when Dante entered a room. I'm cautious. Good, fear makes you stupid, caution makes you survive. She reached out, touched the pearls at my throat. He gave you these. Yes. They were mine from his father. Her eyes misted slightly. He's never given them to anyone before. I felt the weight of them differently now, heavier and more complicated. I didn't know. Now you do. She looked past me to where Dante stood by the door, pretending not to listen. He needs someone who sees him clearly, not the power, not the fear, just him. She switched to English. Are you that person? I don't know yet. She laughed, which turned into coughing. The nurse stepped forward, but she waved her away. Honest. Good. He has too many people who lie to him already. As we left, she called Dante back, whispered something I couldn't hear. He nodded, kissed her forehead, and we walked out into the Milan evening. In the car, he was quiet for a long time. She likes you, he finally said. How can you tell? She didn't have you removed. He looked out the window at the city sliding past. And she told me not to be an idiot, which is her way of saying I've already made my decision. I just need to admit it. Decision about what? He turned to me, and his expression was more open than I'd ever seen it. Vulnerable in a way that felt like a gift and a burden. About whether to let you go before this gets more complicated. He reached across the seat, touched the pearls. About whether these mean what I think they mean. My heart was doing something erratic and unhelpful. What do they mean? That I'm keeping you, if you'll stay. The car stopped at a hotel, different from Geneva, more classic, all old money and Italian elegance. The driver opened the door, and Milan's night air swept in, carrying the scent of espresso and stone and possibility. One room or two? Dante asked. It was the first time he'd given me the choice explicitly. I thought about Nana in a hospital bed, about Dante's mother in her villa, about pearls that had belonged to someone else before they belonged to me, about doors that opened, and what it meant to walk through them knowing they might not open backward. Two, I said, for now. He nodded, neither disappointed nor surprised. For now. We checked in, separate rooms on the same floor. At my door, he stopped me with a hand on my wrist. Thank you for meeting her, it mattered. She's remarkable. She's dying. He said it flatly, but his hand tightened on my wrist, and she wanted to make sure I wasn't alone when she was gone. You're not alone. You have. I gestured vaguely at the world of security and assets and people who rearrange themselves. I have employees and obligations and people who fear me. He let go of my wrist. It's not the same thing. He turned to his own door, unlocked it, paused. We leave for New York tomorrow evening. You'll have time to visit your grandmother. I've arranged for Dr. Hartman to meet you at the hospital. You're coming. Did you think I wouldn't? He looked back at me. You're mine to protect, Lucia. That means I show up. Then he was inside, and I was alone with pearls that were a promise and a question, and maybe the beginning of something I didn't have a name for yet. I called Nana that night, told her about Geneva and Milan and Dante's mother. She listened in that way she had, hearing all the things I wasn't saying. This man, she finally said, he's dangerous. Yes, but not to you. I thought about the way Dante moved through the world, leaving ripples, about the way he'd arranged for specialists and security and choices that looked like freedom. Not yet. Bambina, in our family, we've always known how to dance with dangerous men. Your grandfather, my father, they were not safe men, but they were ours. She coughed, and I heard my aunt's voice in the background. The question is not whether he's dangerous, it's whether you can be dangerous back. After we hung up, I stood on the balcony of my Milan hotel room, looking out at a city that glowed like captured stars, and wondered if I was becoming someone who could be dangerous. Someone who could wear pearls like weapons and make choices that cost more than money. Someone who could dance with the devil and call it partnership. The flight to New York was quiet. Dante worked, I pretended to sleep, and Marcus sat near the cockpit like a guardian of a threshold we'd already crossed. We landed at Teterboro just after dawn, the private terminal a world away from the JFK I'd flown from once, in economy, when Nana had been healthy and I'd been someone who bought discount tickets 3 months in advance. The car took us to Manhattan, to a building in Tribeca where the elevators required keys and the doorman knew Dante by sight. Your apartment is on the 10th floor, he said as we rode up. Furnished, secure. You'll have access to the building's amenities. I have an apartment. You had an apartment, he said it gently. Your lease has been bought out, your belongings are in storage, this is safer. You moved me without asking. I protected you without asking permission. The elevator stopped. The alternative was leaving you vulnerable while you worked for me. That wasn't acceptable. He walked out into a hallway of soft carpet and careful silence, stopped at a door, handed me a key. The hospital visit is in 2 hours. Dr. Hartman will meet you there. Marcus will drive you. And you? I have business. He was already moving toward another door, his apartment, I assumed. But I'll be there for the consultation with the doctor. You don't have to. I want to. He unlocked his door, turned back, and Lucia, welcome home. Then he was gone, and I was standing in a hallway worth more per square foot than my entire old building, holding a key to an apartment I hadn't chosen in a life I was still figuring out how to live. Inside, the apartment was beautiful in that minimal, expensive way. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson, furniture that looked like art, a wardrobe already full of clothes in my size. And in the bedroom, on the nightstand, a framed photo I hadn't packed because I'd never had the chance. Me and Nana from 5 years ago, both of us laughing about something I couldn't remember. He'd taken it from my old apartment, saved it, placed it where I'd see it first thing. I sat on the bed that wasn't mine and cried, because the trap was beautiful and careful and made with attention I'd never expected from anyone, let alone someone who called me an asset and gave me his mother's pearls. 2 hours later, Marcus drove me to the hospital where Nana was being transferred. The private wing, the kind with art on the walls and nurses who smiled like they meant it. Dr. Hartman was already there, tall, precise, with the kind of confidence that came from being very good at saving lives. He spoke to Nana in fluent Italian, examined her gently, then asked to speak with me and my aunt privately. Dante arrived as the doctor was explaining the prognosis. Treatable, manageable, but not curable. Time measured in years, not decades. quality over quantity. The treatment plan is aggressive but realistic, Dr. Hartman said. She'll need monitoring, medication, and eventually more comprehensive care. Cost? My aunt asked, her voice small. Already arranged. Dante spoke for the first time, standing near the window like he was part of the background. All of it, as long as she needs it. My aunt looked at me, then at Dante, then back at me. Lucia, what have you gotten into? Employment, Dante said before I could answer. With comprehensive health benefits for family members. It's all legal and documented. It was such a smooth lie that I almost believed it myself. After the doctor left, I sat with Nana while my aunt went to handle paperwork. Dante stayed, standing near the door like security, like someone who belonged there. Nana studied him with those sharp eyes that age hadn't dimmed. "Vieni qui," she said, "come here." He approached and she took his hand, pulled him closer. Spoke in rapid Calabrese dialect, too fast for me to catch everything. But I heard enough. Questions about family, about obligation, about whether he understood what it meant to be trusted with someone's granddaughter. He answered in the same dialect, and I realized he understood it perfectly, had probably always understood it. When Nana finally released his hand, she looked satisfied. "He'll do," she said in English. Nana. "Zita, I know men like this. Your grandfather was one." She settled back into her pillows. "Just make sure he knows you're not to be trifled with." Dante smiled, a real smile, the first I'd seen that reached all the way to his eyes. "I'm learning that, Signora." We left together, Dante's hand finding its familiar place at the small of my back. In the elevator, alone for the first time since Milan, he spoke. "Your grandmother asked if I understood what I was taking on." "What did you tell her?" "That I was still figuring it out, but I intended to be worthy of the responsibility." The elevator descended through floors of people who didn't know they were inches away from someone dangerous, someone who had somehow become responsible for me and mine. "The apartment," I said, "it's too much." "It's necessary." "The clothes, the security, moving me without asking." "Also necessary." He turned to me. "You're in my world now, Lucia. That comes with certain adjustments." "I didn't agree to this." "You agreed when you got in the car. The rest is just logistics." The elevator opened, and he walked out like the conversation was over. I followed, because anger is easier when you're not also grateful, and I was grateful in ways that made me furious. Outside, the city was bright and cold, and full of people living normal lives. Marcus waited by the car, and Dante held the door. "I'm going back to the office," he said. "Marcus will take you home. There's food in the apartment. Rest. We have dinner tonight with associates. Your presence is required." "Required." "Requested strongly." He paused. "Wear the pearls. They'll send the right message." "Which is?" "That you're under protection. That touching you means answering to me." He stepped back, let Marcus close the door, "and that some assets are too valuable to be considered expendable." The car pulled away, and I watched him through the rear window, standing on the sidewalk like a fixed point, while the city moved around him. "Dangerous," Nana had said, "but not to you." I touched the pearls at my throat, hidden under my shirt but there, always there, and wondered when exactly I'd stopped seeing them as a chain and started seeing them as armor. That night, dinner was at a restaurant in Soho that didn't have a sign because if you needed a sign, you weren't meant to find it. Dante collected me from my apartment, walked right in without knocking, because apparently I'd agreed to that too when I'd gotten in the car, and studied me with approval. "Perfect," he said, taking in the dress I'd chosen, the pearls visible now, the careful makeup I'd applied like war paint. "What's the objective tonight?" "There are people who need to see that you're not just an employee, that you're," he hesitated, searching for the right word. "Yours." "Essential." He offered his arm, old-fashioned and strangely courteous. The distinction matters. The restaurant was all shadows and whispered conversation, tables spaced for privacy. We were led to a corner booth where three men already waited, all of them wearing suits that cost what cars cost. Dante made introductions, names I'd seen in the files, businesses that were fronts for other businesses, and I smiled and shook hands and pretended I was someone who belonged. Throughout dinner, I translated conversations that shouldn't have needed translation, caught subtext in 5 languages, and watched Dante navigate the table like a chess master moving pieces. Then one of the men, Carlo mid-50s with eyes that tracked everything, leaned toward me. "Tell me, Lucia, what does a beautiful woman like you see in this business?" It was the first time anyone had addressed me directly, and the table went quiet. "Opportunity," I said carefully, "and protection." "Protection from what?" Dante's hand found my knee under the table, a warning or a comfort, I wasn't sure. "From invisibility," I answered. "From being someone no one notices until they need something." Carlo smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "And now you're very noticeable. Does that feel safer?" "It feels different." "Different is dangerous in our world." "Then it's fortunate I have excellent protection." I reached up, touched the pearls. The gesture Dante had taught me without words, a signal that I was claimed, covered, off limits. The table relaxed fractionally. Carlo nodded, satisfied, and the conversation moved on to numbers and logistics and things I was meant to hear but not repeat. But under the table, Dante's hand stayed on my knee, thumb moving in small circles that felt more intimate than they should. After dinner, we walked back toward the car. The November air was sharp, and I hadn't worn a heavy enough coat because vanity was easier than warmth. Dante shrugged out of his jacket, draped it over my shoulders. It smelled like his cologne, cedar, and something darker, more expensive, and was still warm from his body. "You did well tonight," he said. I deflected a threat I shouldn't have faced. "You asserted your position, that's different." We reached the car, but he didn't open the door. "Carlo was testing you, testing us, you passed." "By claiming to be yours." "By claiming to choose to be mine, the distinction matters." He was standing close now, closer than necessary. "Does it bother you, being seen as mine?" I thought about that, about pearls and apartments, and the way his mother had looked at me like I was already part of the family. "It bothers me that I don't hate it as much as I should." He smiled, that rare, real smile, and reached up to adjust the jacket on my shoulders. His hand lingered near my throat, not touching the pearls but close enough to remind me they were there. "We should go," he said, but didn't move. Neither did I. The street was quiet, cold, empty except for us, and the car and Marcus standing at a discreet distance. The kind of moment that exists outside of normal time, where decisions get made without words. Then my phone buzzed, the secure one Marcus had given me, and the moment broke. Dante stepped back, opened the car door. "Tomorrow night there's a gallery opening. Art, champagne, dangerous people pretending to be civilized. You'll accompany me." "Is that a request or a requirement?" "It's a hope," he said it softly, almost uncertainly, "that you'll choose to come." I got in the car and he closed the door between us. As we pulled away, I looked back. He was still standing there, watching us go, looking less like someone dangerous and more like someone trying not to be alone. I wore his jacket all the way home, even though the car was heated and I didn't need it. The next day passed in strange domesticity. I explored my new neighborhood, followed at a distance by Marcus or someone like him, found a coffee shop that made decent espresso, a bookstore that sold books I couldn't afford before and could now without thinking. Tried not to think about what that meant. Dante called at noon, his voice crisp and professional. "There's been a development. I need you at the office in an hour." "What kind of development?" "The kind we discuss in person." He hung up before I could argue. The office was in Midtown, a glass tower that reflected the city back at itself. Dante's floor was all clean lines and expensive furniture, assistants who moved with purpose, doors that closed on conversations I wasn't meant to hear. He was in a conference room, standing near floor-to-ceiling windows with another man I recognized from the files. Roman, early 40s, runner-up in a power struggle Dante had apparently won. Lucia, Dante gestured me in. Roman has a proposition. Roman turned, studied me with eyes that calculated value. Your services are very impressive. I'd like to hire you for an upcoming negotiation. Miss Ferrara's schedule is full, Dante said before I could respond. I'm prepared to be very generous. The answer is no. Roman's smile was sharp. Perhaps Miss Ferrara should speak for herself. They both looked at me, and I understood this wasn't about translation. It was about loyalty, ownership, and exactly how much choice I actually had. I appreciate the offer, I said carefully, but I have existing commitments. Commitments can be renegotiated. Not these ones. Roman's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. Dante's protection only lasts as long as he's useful to you. Or as long as she's useful to me, Dante said quietly, and I intend to make sure that's a very long time. Roman left, and his departure felt like a threat hanging in the air. What just happened? I asked. You were tested. Dante loosened his tie, suddenly looking tired. He wanted to see if you could be bought. And you passed, which makes you more valuable and more vulnerable. He moved to the window, looking out at the city. Carlo last night, Roman today. They're circling, trying to find a weakness. Me, I'm the weakness. You're the proof that I care about something other than power. He turned back to me. That's dangerous in this world. I crossed to him, angry and scared and something else. Then why did you bring me into it? Because I answered my phone and heard you speaking Italian like you were breaking. He said it softly. And I made a decision that was tactical and selfish and probably stupid. Which was? To keep you. He reached up, touched my face. The first time he'd touched me like that, gentle and deliberate. To see if someone like me could have something real instead of just useful. I should have stepped back. Should have reminded him about boundaries and choices and the difference between protection and possession. Instead, I leaned into his touch just slightly. Is this real? I don't know yet. His thumb traced my cheekbone, but I'd like to find out. The door opened. Marcus, his face carefully neutral. Sir, the car's ready for this evening. Dante's hand dropped, and the moment ended as cleanly as if someone had cut the thread. The gallery opening, he said, stepping back into his professional voice. We leave in 3 hours. Marcus will take you home to change. Dante. We'll continue this conversation later. He was already turning back to his desk, to his computer, to the world he controlled better than he controlled whatever was happening between us. Where something that makes you feel powerful. Tonight might get complicated. In the car, Marcus met my eyes in the rearview mirror. He doesn't do this, he said quietly. Do what? Care, not like this. He navigated Manhattan traffic with the ease of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. I've worked for him for 8 years, never seen him bring anyone into the inner circle, never seen him vulnerable. I don't want to be someone's vulnerability. Too late, but he said it kindly. Just be careful with him and with yourself. That evening, I chose a dress from the wardrobe that was black and simple and made me look like someone who had opinions about art. The pearls, of course. Heels that added 3 inches and made me feel dangerous. When Dante collected me, he stopped in the doorway, taking me in. You look, he didn't finish. Powerful. Terrifying, he said it like a compliment. Perfect. The gallery was in Chelsea, all white walls and careful lighting, art that probably meant something to someone. We arrived to flashbulbs. Apparently Dante was newsworthy enough to warrant paparazzi, and he guided me through them with his hand at the small of my back. Inside, champagne and beautiful people and conversations that were really negotiations. Dante introduced me to artists and collectors, and people whose names I recognized from different files, the legitimate ones, the ones who didn't need translations because they weren't hiding anything. It was almost normal, almost a regular evening where I was just his date, not his asset. Then I saw Carlo, near a sculpture that looked like it was melting, and with him, the woman from Geneva, the one in red who'd worried about containers from Marseille. "Dante," I said quietly. He followed my gaze and his expression didn't change, but something in the air shifted. "Stay close," he said. We moved through the gallery and I felt eyes tracking us. Carlo and the woman, yes, but others too. A network of attention that made me realize this wasn't a coincidence. We'd been expected. Near the back gallery, Dante stopped in front of a painting. Dark oils, religious imagery, something that looked like a martyrdom. "Beautiful work," Carlo said, appearing beside us, though perhaps a bit on the nose given current circumstances. "I prefer to think of it as aspirational," Dante replied. "Aspiring to what? Sainthood?" "Survival." Dante turned to face him. "Which I understand is getting harder for some of our friends. Regulatory pressure, unexpected audits, very inconvenient timing." Carlo's smile was thin. "Yes, it's almost as if someone is providing information to the authorities, someone with inside knowledge." "I'd be careful about those accusations. They tend to have consequences." "As does betrayal." The woman in red stepped forward, glass of champagne in hand. "Perhaps we could discuss this somewhere more private." "I don't think that will be necessary," Dante said. "We have nothing to discuss." "You have everything to discuss." Carlo's voice dropped, "including the future of your translator." Dante's hand tightened on my back, not painful but present. A reminder. "Miss Ferrara is under my protection. That's not negotiable." "Everything's negotiable." Carlo looked directly at me. "Especially when the financial police are asking about witness testimonies." My stomach dropped. "I haven't talked to anyone." "Not yet," the woman smiled, "but pressure makes people surprisingly talkative." Dante stepped between us, subtle but clear. "If you threaten her again, even obliquely, you'll find the regulatory scrutiny you're experiencing looks mild in comparison to what comes next." Bold words. Observable facts. Dante took my hand, the first time he'd done that in public, and turned toward the exit. "We're leaving. Marcus will ensure we're not followed. And gentlemen, Signora, I suggest you remember that mutually assured destruction works best when everyone believes in it." We walked out through the gallery, through flashbulbs that caught us leaving early, through cold November air to where Marcus already had the car running. Inside, Dante made a phone call in rapid Italian, too fast for me to follow. Then another in what sounded like Russian. Then a third in English, his voice cold and precise. When he hung up, he looked at me. "We're leaving the city tonight." "Where?" "Upstate. I have a property near the Catskills. Secure, private, off any grid that matters." He reached across the seat, took my hand again. "I'm moving your grandmother there too. The medical facility is better than what she has now, and it's protected. You can't just uproot." "I can and I am. Carlo just threatened you, which means they're desperate enough to consider violence." His hand tightened on mine. "I won't risk you. This isn't your choice to make alone. It is when your safety is involved." He pulled me closer, and there was something fierce in his expression, something that was part protection and part possession. "You think I brought you into this world without preparing for exactly this scenario. Everything you need is already in place. Your grandmother's transport is arranged. Your aunt is being contacted. This isn't improvisation, Lucia. This is contingency." The car was already on the West Side Highway, heading toward bridges that led out of the city. I watched Manhattan's lights recede, feeling like I was leaving something behind that I couldn't name. How long? Until I neutralized the threat. He said it like it was simple, like threats were chess pieces he could remove from the board. A week, maybe two. And if you can't, then we stay gone. I have resources everywhere. We disappear completely if necessary. That's not a life. It's survival. He lifted my hand, pressed his lips to my knuckles, a gesture that felt antiquated and somehow perfect. And survival with you is better than anything else I can think of. We drove north through darkness, leaving the city behind. Marcus took back roads, doubled back twice to check for followers, finally pulled onto a private drive that wound through trees. The house appeared like something from another era, stone and wood, lights glowing warm through tall windows. Not a safe house, a home. You grew up here, I asked as we pulled up to the door. Summers, he got out, came around to open my door. My mother's family property, the only place I've ever felt, he stopped. Safe. Real. He guided me inside where everything was dark wood and comfortable furniture, art on the walls that was personal rather than expensive. Your room is upstairs. So is mine. There's a medical suite in the east wing for your grandmother. You planned this. I planned for every contingency the moment I gave you my number. He moved to the fireplace where logs were already laid, lit them with a long match, flames catching and spreading. Because people I care about become targets, and I don't leave vulnerabilities unprotected. I stood in this house that was real, watching him light a fire like it was something he did every day, and felt something shift inside me. You're not what I expected, I said. He looked up from the fire. What did you expect? A monster or a saint? Not, I gestured at the room, at him, at everything. Not this. This. Human. He stood crossed to where I was standing. The firelight caught in his eyes made them look warm instead of calculating. I am human, he said quietly. That's the problem. If I were a monster, I'd have used you and discarded you. If I were a saint, I'd have let you walk away. Instead, I'm just a man who heard you speaking Italian and made a choice he can't take back. What choice? To try. He reached up, cupped my face with both hands. To see if someone like me could have something good instead of just powerful. I should have stepped back, should have reminded him about boundaries and choices and all the reasons this was complicated. Instead, I kissed him. It was brief, tentative, a question rather than an answer. But he responded like it was the first honest thing either of us had done, pulling me closer, deepening the kiss until it felt less like a choice and more like inevitability. When we broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. That's going to complicate things, he said. Things were already complicated. Fair point, he smiled, and it was the real smile, the rare one. Your room is second door on the left. Mine is at the end of the hall. The door between us doesn't lock. Is that a threat or a promise? It's information. He stepped back, but his hand lingered on my waist. Sleep. Tomorrow we figure out how to make you safe enough to leave. I went upstairs, found a room that was prepared like he'd been waiting for me to need it. My few belongings from the city apartment, clothes in the closet, even the photo of me and Nana on the nightstand. The door between our rooms was exactly where he'd said. Unlocked. An invitation or a temptation or maybe just the truth of whatever we were becoming. I didn't go through it. Not that night. But I didn't lock my side either. The next morning, sunlight through unfamiliar windows woke me. I smelled coffee, followed it downstairs to a kitchen that was warm and bright, where Dante stood at the stove making eggs like it was the most natural thing in the world. You cook. I survive. He plated the eggs, gestured to a chair. Marcus is bringing your grandmother this afternoon. Dr. Hartman will arrive tomorrow to establish her care routine. I sat, accepted coffee that was perfect. This feels domestic. It is domestic, that's the point. He sat across from me, and in this light in this room he looked younger, less dangerous. I want you to see what normal could look like, before you decide whether you can live with my version of it. Your version involves running from financial police and moving elderly women in the middle of the night. My version involves protecting people I care about by any means necessary. He met my eyes, including giving them the choice to walk away if it's too much. Is that what you want, for me to walk away? No, he said it simply. But I want you to stay because you choose to, not because you're trapped by circumstance or gratitude or fear. I sipped my coffee, thought about choices and doors, and whether I'd been free since the moment I'd answered my phone in Italian. What happens after you neutralize the threat? We go back to the city. You continue working with me, legitimately, on projects that won't endanger you. We see if what we have here translates to real life. And if it doesn't, then I keep you safe, make sure your grandmother has everything she needs, and let you build whatever life you want. He reached across the table, took my hand. I'm many things, Lucia, but I keep my promises. You're protected regardless of whether you choose me. It was the first time he'd offered me a way out that felt real. I need to think, I said. Then think, he squeezed my hand, let go. Your grandmother arrives at 3. Until then, the house and grounds are yours. Marcus is perimeter security. You won't see him unless there's danger. He left me in the kitchen, went upstairs to make phone calls in languages I was starting to recognize. I walked the property, found gardens that were winter dormant and beautiful, paths that led to tree lines, a view that stretched for miles. It was peaceful in a way my life had never been peaceful, safe in a way I hadn't known I needed. And waiting in that safety was a man who'd rearranged his entire world to make space for me, but was still willing to let me go if that's what I chose. Nana arrived exactly at 3, in a medical transport that was more luxury than ambulance. Dr. Hartman accompanied her, and together they supervised her move into a suite that had clearly been designed for exactly this purpose. When she was settled, I sat with her while she surveyed her new surroundings. This is his home, she said, not a question. Yes. And you're here because someone threatened me, and he decided to protect me by relocating everyone I love to his family's safe house. She laughed, which turned into coughing. When she recovered, she looked at me with those knowing eyes. Your grandfather did something similar once. Before we were married, there was trouble with men from another village. He moved my entire family to his uncle's farm until it was resolved. How long did that take? 3 days, but we stayed a month because we were already there, and because by the end of the week I'd decided to marry him. She gestured for me to come closer. This man, Dante, he moves like your grandfather moved, like the whole world is a problem he can solve if he's just clever enough. Was Nano clever enough? Usually, when he wasn't, we solved it together. She touched my face. That's the secret, Bambina. Not whether he's strong enough to protect you, but whether you're strong enough to be his partner when his strength fails. That night, Dante knocked on my door around 9. I opened it to find him in jeans and a sweater, looking more human than I'd ever seen him. Walk with me. We went outside, into cold November air that smelled like wood smoke and coming winter. He led me down a path I hadn't explored, to a small gazebo that overlooked the valley. This is where my father proposed to my mother, he said, sitting on the bench. He was not a good man, powerful, dangerous, exactly what you'd expect, but he loved her completely. It was his only redeeming quality. I sat beside him. Your mother told me the pearls were his. His grandmother's originally. Italian aristocracy, old money, older secrets. He looked out at the darkening valley. He gave them to my mother as a promise that no matter what he did in his world, she would always be safe in hers. Did he keep that promise? Until the day he died. Dante turned to me. I gave them to you because I wanted to make the same promise, that no matter what happens in my world, you're protected in yours. But your world keeps bleeding into mine, which is why I'm giving you a choice. He took my hand and his was warm despite the cold. I've spent the last 2 days making arrangements. Carlo and Roman are being handled legally through regulators and auditors, nothing that will blow back on you. In a week, maybe less, the threat will be neutralized. And then you choose. Stay with me, work with me, see if this, he gestured between us, is real and sustainable. Or I set you up somewhere safe, far from my world, with enough resources that you never have to worry about money or your grandmother's care. You're free either way. That's not a real choice. You've made it impossible to leave. I've made it possible for you to stay. He lifted my hand, kissed my knuckles again, that old-fashioned gesture that was becoming familiar. There's a difference. I looked at him in the dimming light, this man who'd taken every vulnerability I had and turned it into protection, who'd offered me freedom and safety and something that felt dangerously close to love. What do you want? I asked. For you to choose me, every day, not because you're trapped or grateful or scared, but because you want to. His voice was quiet, almost uncertain. I want to be chosen, Lucia, not just useful. I thought about Nana's words, about partnership and dancing with devils and being strong enough to lead when his strength failed. I need time, I said. Then take it. He stood, pulled me up with him. But while you're thinking, know that I'm already chosen. Have been since I heard you speaking Italian like your world was breaking. I just need you to catch up. He walked me back to the house, to the door between our rooms that still didn't lock. Left me there with a kiss on my forehead that felt more intimate than the one we'd shared by the fireplace. I lay awake that night, listening for sounds from his room, wondering if he was lying awake too, wondering if this was what falling in love felt like, terrifying and inevitable and wrapped in pearls that looked like chains but felt like wings. 3 days later, Dante's phone rang during breakfast. He answered, spoke briefly in Russian, hung up. It's done, he said. What's done? Carlo's shipping operation was raided last night. Customs found irregularities that will take years to untangle. Roman's accounts are frozen pending a financial investigation. Their ability to threaten you ended about 6 hours ago. Just like that. Just like that. He sipped his coffee. I could have done it violently. It would have been faster, but you didn't sign up for that version of me. I thought about that, about the choice he'd made to use law instead of force, systems instead of violence. Because of me. Because of who I'm trying to become. He set down his cup. With you. That afternoon, Dr. Hartman pulled me aside after checking on Nana. She's doing well, better than I expected, actually. The stress reduction and quality care are making a significant difference. How long does she have? If she continues like this, years possibly, quality years, he smiled. It's remarkable what peace does for the body. Peace. I'd given Nana peace by accepting Dante's protection. By getting in the car, by wearing the pearls, by letting him rearrange my life into something safe and comfortable and his. I found Dante in his study, working on a laptop. He looked up when I entered, and something in my expression made him close the computer. Decision, he asked. I crossed to him, took his face in my hands the way he'd taken mine. I choose the storm, I said, with boundaries, with transparency, with the understanding that I'm your partner, not your possession. Agreed. I want to finish school. I want autonomy. I want honesty about what you do, even the parts I won't like. Agreed. And I want the freedom to walk away if this stops working, without losing my grandmother's care or your protection. That's always been the deal. He pulled me closer. But I'm going to work very hard to make sure you never want to leave. I kissed him then, properly this time, with the weight of a choice fully made. He responded like he'd been waiting for permission, pulling me into his lap, holding me like I was precious and dangerous, and exactly what he'd been looking for. When we broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. "I have a confession," he said. "I'm listening." "My mother didn't just want to meet you, she told me something." He hesitated. "About my father and your grandfather." My stomach dropped. "What about them?" "They knew each other. Worked together, actually, in the old days before I was born. Your grandfather saved my father's life once in Calabria. There was a debt." "What kind of debt?" "The kind my father intended to repay by taking care of your family if anything happened to your grandfather. He did, quietly, for years. Money that appeared in your grandmother's account, opportunities that opened at exactly the right time. It stopped when my father died. You knew this when you hired me." "I suspected. I confirmed it after Geneva." He met my eyes. "That's why I could move so quickly with the specialist, the arrangements. I wasn't creating obligations. I was settling my father's debt. I should have been angry, should have felt manipulated. But instead, I just felt the weight of history. Old men making promises, debts that passed to sons and granddaughters, connections that looked like coincidence but were really legacy. Did my grandmother know? I think she suspected. That's why she wasn't surprised when I showed up, why she asked if I understood obligation." He touched my face. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner." "Would it have changed anything?" "No, but you deserve to know." He pulled me closer. "The debt is paid now. What we build from here is choice, not obligation." I thought about that, about debts and choices, and whether there was really a difference when the outcome was the same. "Your mother," I said, "how is she?" His expression shifted, grief he was trying to contain. "Fatting. Dr. Hartman says weeks, maybe days. She wanted to make sure." His voice cracked slightly. "She wanted to make sure I wasn't alone before she left." "You're not alone." "Not anymore." We sat like that in his study, while the afternoon light faded and the house settled around us. His phone rang twice. He didn't answer. The world continued spinning, dangerous and complicated and full of threats he'd neutralize with phone calls and leverage and the careful application of power. But in that moment, we were just two people who'd found each other through coincidence and debt, and a phone call answered in Italian. Two people choosing each other, despite everything. "I should check on Nana," I finally said. "I'll come with you." We walked through the house together, his hand finding mine like it was already habit. Nana was awake, looking out her window at the garden. "Bambina," she said when she saw me, "come here." I sat beside her bed. Dante stood near the door, giving us space but staying close. "This life he's offering," she said, "it's not simple." "I know. But it's yours, your choice." She looked past me to where Dante stood. "Vini," she said to him, "come." He approached, and she took both our hands, put them together. "Your grandfather and his father," she said, mixing Italian and English. "They were complicated men, dangerous, but they understood loyalty. They understood that some debts are paid with years, not money." She looked at Dante. "Your father kept his promise to mine. Now you keep yours to her." "I will, signora." "Good." She settled back into her pillows, suddenly tired. "Now leave me to rest. I need my strength for later." Outside her room, Dante pulled me close. "Later." I don't know, but a cold feeling was settling in my chest. We had 4 more days with Nana. 4 days of watching her fade in the peaceful way Dr. Hartman promised, surrounded by care and comfort and family. Dante's mother passed the day before Nana, and I held him while he grieved for a woman who'd wanted him to find connection before she left. When Nana went, it was gently. She squeezed my hand, looked at Dante, and said, "Prochi la mia bambina," protect my girl. "Sempre," he promised, "always." Then she was gone, and I was alone in a world that had been rearranged by a man who'd heard me speaking Italian and decided I was worth keeping. The funeral was small, beautiful. Dante arranged everything, handled details I couldn't manage, held my hand during the service and let me grieve without trying to fix it. After, in the quiet of the house, he found me in the gazebo where his father had proposed to his mother. "What now?" I asked. "Now we live." He sat beside me, pulled me close. "We go back to the city. You go back to school. I restructure the business toward legitimate operations I've already started. You're going straight. I'm going sustainable. There's a difference." He kissed my temple. "I have reasons to think long-term now. Reasons that look better when the lawyers aren't worried about RICO charges. Because of me. Because of us." He turned me to face him. "I love you, Lucia. I don't know when it happened, somewhere between Geneva and Milan and watching you choose to stay despite everything. But I do. I should have been surprised, should have felt overwhelmed. But instead, it just felt true, the inevitable conclusion to a story that started with a phone call and an impossible choice." "I love you too," I said. "Even though you're inconvenient and dangerous, and you rearranged my entire life without asking. Especially because of that." "Maybe," I kissed him, tasting salt from tears I hadn't realized I was crying. "What's next?" "Whatever we want, school work, building something that's ours instead of mine." He pulled a small box from his pocket, velvet, old, worn smooth at the edges. "But first, a question." Inside was a ring, antique Italian with a stone that caught the late light and held it. "My grandmother's," he said. "My father gave it to my mother after I was born. She wanted you to have it." "Dante, I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I'm asking if you'll consider a future where you might." He took the ring out, held it up. "Where we build something together that's more than protection and debt and convenient arrangements." I thought about Nana's words, about dancing with devils and being strong enough to lead, about choosing the storm because the calm was too lonely to bear. "Yes," I said, "I'll consider it." He slipped the ring on my finger, a promise, a question, a future written in antique gold. Then he kissed me while the sun set over the valley, turning everything gold and possible. 6 months later, I walked across a stage and accepted a degree I'd thought I'd never finish. Dante was in the audience, next to my aunt and Marcus, and people from a life that had become inexplicably mine. After, we went to dinner at a restaurant that had a sign because we didn't need to hide anymore. "How does it feel?" he asked. "Like I'm someone different than I was a year ago." "Better or worse?" "Different." I reached across the table, took his hand. "Good different." The ring on my finger caught the light. I'd started wearing it full-time last month, after Dante had quietly restructured his business into something that looked legitimate because it actually was. After I'd realized that choosing him wasn't giving up autonomy but finding partnership. "There's something I want to show you," he said after dinner. He drove us to Brooklyn, to a neighborhood I knew too well. Stopped in front of my old building with the broken steps and graffiti. "Why are we here?" "Look up." I looked. The building was different, renovated, clean, lights in windows that had been dark. A sign on the door, Ferrara Community Center. "What?" "Your grandmother's legacy. Funded by the debt my father owed yours, administered by people who need second chances." He squeezed my hand. I thought about nomming it after my mother, but this felt right. Nana would have liked knowing her name meant hope. I cried then, messy and grateful and overwhelmed. He held me on the sidewalk where I used to wait for buses, in the neighborhood that had been cold and desperate and mine. "This is who you are now?" I asked when I could speak. "This is who I'm trying to become. With you." He lifted my chin, kissed me gently. "Someone who pays debts forward instead of extracting them. Someone who protects communities instead of exploiting them." "That's ambitious." "I have good motivation." We stood there, looking at a building that was transformation made solid. Proof that people could choose to be different if they had the right reasons. "Marry me," he said, not a question this time. "For real, not someday but soon. Be my partner in all of it, the business, the legacy, the becoming." I looked at the ring, at the building, at the man who'd heard me speaking Italian, and decided I was worth rearranging his entire world for. "Yes," I said, "but I'm keeping my name." He laughed. I wouldn't expect anything else. We married in the spring in the garden of his upstate house. Small ceremony, dangerous people trying to be civilized, my aunt crying, Marcus in a suit that probably made him uncomfortable. Dante wore his father's watch, and I wore his grandmother's ring and his mother's pearls. When we said our vows, he promised protection and partnership and honesty. I promised strength and challenge and choosing him every day, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. The reception was at the community center, because it felt right to celebrate new beginnings in a place dedicated to second chances. We danced under lights that Dante had installed himself, surrounded by people who'd known us separately and were learning to know us together. "Do you regret it?" he asked as we swayed to music his mother had loved. "The choice you made when you got in the car?" I thought about that phone call outside the Belvedere Club, about being cold and invisible and desperate enough to accept help from a stranger, about all the doors I'd walked through since then, some of them dangerous, all of them his. "No," I said, "but ask me again in 50 years. He laughed, pulled me closer. "Deal." We left late, drove back to the house that had become ours. Upstairs, in the room that was no longer separate from his, he helped me out of the dress and the pearls and the weight of the day. "I love you," he said against my skin. "I know," I answered. "You rearranged the world to tell me. And you let me." I did better than that. I pulled him close, this man who was dangerous and protective and mine. I rearranged it back. Years later, standing in the offices of a legitimate business empire built on restructured remains of his father's organization, I would think about that night, about choices and doors, and the difference between being possessed and being chosen, about answering a phone call in Italian, and finding that some traps are beautiful enough to be called home. But that night, we were just two people who'd found each other through coincidence and debt and impossible choices, building something new from the complicated pieces of what we'd been before. The pearls stayed on the nightstand, beautiful chains I could put on or take off at will. The ring stayed on my finger, a promise that was freely given and freely kept. And somewhere in the house, in a frame on a wall, was a photo from the wedding. Me in white, him in black, both of us laughing at something Marcus had said, looking less like a mafia boss and his translator and more like two people who'd learned to dance together. Not leading, not following, but moving as one through the complicated choreography of building a life from debt and danger. And a phone call answered in Italian on a cold December night.